Hello, and welcome to Scott's Odyssey. In Pennsylvania, we have a lot of history that's just as dark as the good things are light. And for a long time, someone somewhere deep in the historical archives felt it was equally important to remember those dark times. So while you travel through our wonderful state, you will often see what are commonly referred to as the blue signs, which will give you a maximized amount of nondescript information in order to tickle your brain to hopefully go and learn something about history. If nothing else, you'll at least know that there's a marker that's attributed to an event close to where your feet or your car tires had just trod. This is one of those locations. See you in a minute. The year was 1934, and it was during the colder part of November when the weather in Pennsylvania is either wet and cold or frozen and cold, usually windy, and ultimately a very miserable week or two before winter fully sets in. It was in the early morning of November 24th when John Clark and Clark Jardine were walking along Centerville Road on the South Mountain near Pine Grove Furnace in Cumberland County, looking into the forest for potential firewood when they both set their sights on something along the side of the road. What they had found was rather unusual, to say the least. It was a blanket, and the two of them initially believed that someone must have used the blanket to cover up a dead deer. The weird part was, of course, that someone would have covered it up, but honestly, in Pennsylvania there are so many dead deer during November that all weird and strange things happen to their carcasses to this day. So the men decided to go and take a peek at what was under the blanket. To their horror, what they found were three little girls tenderly tucked under the blanket, resting peacefully forever. The Carlisle police were contacted, and the autopsy report declared that the three little girls had been starved for 18 to 20 hours and were strangled, dying from asphyxiation. Now, crimes of violence beyond occasional bar fights and maybe a few minor robberies were few and far between in 1935, especially in places that were outside of the Philadelphia or Pittsburgh areas. To put a size cap of the frequency of such violent crimes, it's important to inform you that the stories of these deaths spread like wildfire and became front-page news on every newspaper across all of the United States. As found in the newspapers across the country, right next to the story of the girls was found a story seemingly unrelated, yet an equally horrific violent crime taking place in Pennsylvania, where more than 100 miles away, just outside the rural city of Altoona, a man and a woman's bodies were recovered at the Spring Meadow Station on the Holidays branch of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Both the man and the woman were found shot dead. Back in Carlisle, a public viewing was established for the children at the Ewing Funeral Parlor, and it is estimated that over 3,000 people came to view the bodies of the three chestnut-haired girls, and nobody was able to identify who they were. But a key note was that a local bus driver recalled a woman who was escorting three children and having a black leather suitcase had boarded his bus, stating that they had come from New York. Now, during a time before DNA analysis, Dr. Milton W. Eddy, a professor of biology at Dickinson College, employed a new scientific method of biological testing, and with the use of the children's hair, was able to determine that all three of the girls were indeed siblings, and on a request from the Altoona Sheriff's Department, was able to test the two dead adults in Altoona and determine that they were direct relatives to the children. Specifically, the man was the father of the three girls. The woman was a cousin or an aunt. After a few days, a woman who owned a diner in Philadelphia stepped forward and reported that she had seen the three children with a couple, and they were eating at her establishment on November 18th. She remembers them because the man purportedly was looking for work, and noted that the man saying that his children had become a burden. As the investigation continued, the police found a black leather suitcase with a jumble of clothes of every type, including a man's gray shirt from a store in Napa, California. Further into the investigation, an abandoned blue Pontiac sedan was found right here in McVeigh, 70 miles and 2 mountain ranges into the Alleghenies. The man was finally identified as Elmo Noakes. based on a missing persons report from the Roseville, California Police Department for a Winifred Pierce, identifiable by her clubbed foot who had been missing, along with her uncle Elmo J. Noakes. Things were starting to come together. When the police were able to find relatives in Roseville, California, they reached out to them to gather more information and inform them of Elmo Noakes' demise. In this process, they were informed that Elmo had 3 children and his wife had passed away just 2 years prior. They also had informed the police that he had developed an unholy relationship with his housekeeper, who happened to also be his niece, Winifred Pierce, and upon purchasing a Pontiac sedan, took the children and Winifred and left California the next day. The names of the children were Norma Sedgwick, age 12, DeWilla Noakes, age 10, and Cordelia Noakes, age 8, all 3 the daughters of Elmo Noakes and his late wife. The police were able to map out the travels of Elmo from California to Philadelphia, with their first stop in Pennsylvania being Waynesboro on the night of November 17th, all the way through his unsuccessful journey of allegedly attempting to find work and a place to stay while using fake names and false former addresses in order to cover up his place of origin. The conclusion of the investigation was that Noakes, unable to find work, eventually decided to kill his children so they would not starve to death. He then gently laid them in the woods and covered their bodies. Elmo and Winifred continued on westward, perhaps in the hopes of getting back to California. When the car ran out of gas, they continued to hitchhike the rest of the way to Altoona. The records show that Elmo attempted to pawn his glasses for $1 to no avail. Winifred pawned her coat for $3. Elmo used $2.85 of the $3 to purchase a .22 caliber rifle, which he, in turn, had Winifred expose her breast to him and shot her clean through the heart. And then he turned the rifle on himself and vented his own skull. On November 30th, the American Legion Post number 101 of Carlisle furnished a funeral at the Ewing Funeral Home on South Hanover Street, funded by spirited local citizens, with a burial in Westminster Memorial Gardens. The plaque on their stone reads, "Sleep tender blossoms folded so close in slumber, which broken shall be by his gentle voice whispering low, little children, O come unto me." My dears, do you know how a long time ago, 2 poor little babes whose names I don't know were stolen away on a bright summer day and left in the woods, so I've heard people say. And when it was night, how sad was their plight. The sun it went down and the moon gave no light. They sobbed and they sighed and they bitterly cried, and the poor little things, they lay down and died. And when they were dead, the robins so red brought strawberry leaves and over them spread. And all the day long they sang them this song, poor babes in the woods, poor babes in the woods. And don't you remember the babes in the woods? The name Babes of the Woods, which is how these children were referenced by the locals, is based on an old lullaby from England, which you heard recited just a moment ago. For another story of signs along the side of the road, you can check out this video here. As always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.